Today we're going to be making some burnt ends and brisket from a full packer. Stay tuned. So this is a USDA prime brisket. I'm going to trim off all the hard cap on here, some of the fat that won't render. I'm going to leave all the other fat that only adds flavor to it. So let's get started. So we're going to start trimming off all this fat here. We only want about 1/4 of an inch or so of fat. And as I mentioned, this is a prime brisket. I've done many choice. I've done many prime too. I don't notice a huge difference in taste between the prime and the choice, but I do notice there is a difference in the fat or the quality of the fat or whatnot. With the choice, there's still a lot of fat, but it seems to have a little bit more of the hard fat, the hard cap. You need to trim a little bit more with the choice. Whereas the prime, it's a little bit softer. But even still, a lot of this needs to be trimmed out. So, if you're stuck in between getting a choice or a prime brisket, you could save a few bucks on it and go choice. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference for you, but either option is a good option though. So we're going to trim this up. Once we got it ready, we'll get our rub ready. For the rub, I'm going equal parts salt and pepper with no binder. So I'm going to use about 1/2 cup of salt, 1/2 cup of pepper, and apply it all over the brisket here. In terms of which salts, you could use kosher salt, or in this case, I'm using Himalayan pink salt. Either one is fine. And then pepper, just ground cracked pepper. You can use a mortar and pestle, food processor, or coffee grinder. All of those do a great job at grinding. So we're going to apply it liberally to both or all sides of the brisket here. And once we're done, we're going to let this sit for 2 to 4 hours. In some cases, you can leave it overnight if you want. So we'll leave it sit 2 to 4 hours, and then we'll get to cooking. So in this cook, I'm using Hickory wood chips. I'll put the link below, but I found the PVC does better with the chips than they do chunks. I tried hanging the packer brisket, but it hangs too low. It's almost in the coals. So typically you lose 2 to 3 inches to basically char if it hangs too low. So you got a couple options. You can hang it like a hammock. You hang both ends of the meat. That's not my favorite option. The other one is you can kind of hook the meat a little bit lower, so there's some meat above the rebar. So that's an option. Or you can just put it on the grate like I'm going to do here. Either way works out just fine, or any way works out just fine with this. It's more or less preference. I haven't noticed any difference in taste. So I'm going to put this on the grate here. I'm going to let it cook until it comes to 160. Hits that stall there. Then I'm going to wrap in foil. After 3 hours and 45 minutes, the point has reached 160 and the flat 163. That flat sort of stalled for about 45 minutes to let that point catch up. So here I'm adding a cup of beef broth. You can also add apple cider vinegar, beer, whatever you choose here. And I'm then going to wrap it up in 2 layers. You want this wrap to be snug. And after you've wrapped it, we're going to put it back on until we get a temperature of 205 in the flat. And whatever the temperature is in the point, it'll probably be around 185 to 195. At that point, we'll be able to start making our burnt ends. The flat has reached an internal temperature of 205 degrees here, so we're going to pull it. So you'll note these deep dark colors of this brisket, just perfect. So one thing I want to point out, the liquids that are in the bottom of this foil make a perfect au jus, particularly if you want to reheat it. It's definitely worth keeping, at least I believe so. But so after we collect that liquid, now it's time to separate the point from the flat. After you've done that, you can put the flat in a cooler to rest for anywhere between 1 to 3 or 4 hours. After you've done that, we're going to cube the point, and I like to cube them in half inch to an inch cubes. So we'll cut those up, put them here in this pan, and then put our sauce on top of it. I'm going to forego diabetes today and just do barbecue sauce. Now you can add butter and honey and brown sugar and things of that nature to this, but as I mentioned, I'm just going to do barbecue sauce. We're going to coat these cubes liberally in barbecue sauce and then mix it up real good, turn them all over, and we'll put these back on the smoker for half hour to an hour until that probe or a toothpick or whatever you're using slides smoothly through there, and some of that barbecue sauce reduces down to basically a sugar. So we pulled the burn ends when those got nice and tender, but before we get to those, let's give this brisket a look. So I can tell sliced into it, it's nice and tender, got a good smoke ring to it. Of course, it's always important to cut perpendicular to the grain on a brisket. Here's a pull test. Now these aren't little sissy slices, these are some thick ones. It pulls really well here. So clearly the brisket looks good, it's got a nice smoke ring, it pulls well, so I think it's time to give it a test. Alright, so let's give this a taste. Oh, it's perfect. It's tender, juicy. What do you think? It's good, huh? Alright, let's try the burn ends now. Those are awesome.
Can I eat some?
It's gonna be hot. Okay.
I'll let it cool down.
Here, try that. You like that?
Feel good.
That's really good too.
Your hands are freezing.
Brisket turned out great. Burn ends, really good.
Daddy, you got some stuff on your face.
Oh.
No, on the bottom.
Okay, I'll get it later.
It's like, no,
Alright,
right
so I'm going inside to eat. Thank you all for watching this episode of Light 'em Up Outdoors.
No, it's like right here.
What are you going to say? Subscribe?
Subscribe down it.
Subscribe and comment down below, right? And like the video. Alright, thank y'all.